As usual, today I have a lot of stuff planned. After giving Tani the proper amount of scratches, I am ready to get going with the day. I've got a few very exciting things planned the next couple of days, but you guys know the rules. Before I do any of the fun horse stuff, I have to make sure it is all spick and span around here. With Frisco not being able to get out on the grass this year quite yet, I am having to mow all of the little areas that I usually let him graze. After I'm done with this, I'm gonna let you guys in on a little bit of a secret as to what we are doing for the next couple of days. You guys know I've been having the itch to get another Mustang, so today I thought I'd go through and give you a little bit of insight into what you may need if you do plan to get one of these animals in the future. They always have the requirements really well laid out at the adoption events and on their online portal. A lot of the stuff is pretty basic, like being 18 years old, and if you adopt, you are not allowed to take the horse outside of the United States for an entire year. Adopters cannot have any prior convictions of inhumane treatment of animals. Typically, there are a lot of questions surrounding the type of facility you need for a completely wild horse. A lot of these horses have been gathered from the wild, so they have no idea about fencing. I think the most important part about getting one of these horses is making sure that it's adequate for them to not escape and also not get hurt in case they do try to test the fence. If you guys have been watching my channel for a while, you know that I used to be fairly involved with the Mustangs. This current setup that I have is a little bit tricky to bring fresh out of holding Mustangs to. I did make a purchase the other day at an online auction that will give me a little bit more wiggle room if I do decide to get another Mustang in the near future. I take the responsibility of getting any new animal very seriously, so before I set my mind to go to an auction or any kind of adoption event, I do make sure that my property is spick and span and all of the horses that I already have are getting everything that they need. This tiny little patch of grass is the last place I have to mow before all of my chores are done around here. Currently, I do not own any BLM Mustangs. I have Stewie, which is a cross between a domestic horse and his mama was a BLM Mustang. I also have Scarlet, which is a almost 3-year-old Reservation Mustang that I bought from a regular horse sale. Really, the only difference between Scarlet and a BLM Mustang is the way they're handled and the protections that they get when they're rounded up. Most reservation horses are just sent to an auction or sold outright, and that is how I got Scarlet. She was gathered very close to the Pryor Mountain herd management area. Really, the only thing separating her from those horses was a tiny mountain range. I purchased her for $25 when she was only a couple months old, and she'll be turning 3 in July. It's been really cool to see her grow up, and compared to a regular BLM Mustang, she has been much more difficult than any horse I've adopted in the past. Out of all of the Mustangs that I've got in the past, none of them really test the fence, but Scarlet definitely did.
In half a mile, turn left.
I've been going back and forth about getting a set of 6-foot panels for quite a while now. This is one of the most important requirements that the BLM has for getting a completely untrained Mustang. I was really lucky that I found this set of heavy duty panels at an online auction, and I ended up paying around $150 per panel. I did find these exact panels for sale online, brand new, for around $350, so I think I got a pretty good deal on them. I was also really thankful for the helping hand I got when I went to pick them up. Although I would have loved to pick up more of these, I got 6 because that's all they had available. Currently, there are a few different places on my property where I could easily have a Mustang and have it meet all of the requirements put forth by the BLM.
Come on, boys. Like I see. Come on, Stewie.
I go to a bunch of these Mustang events every year, and it's always surprising to hear people come hoping to adopt a Mustang and they have no idea about the requirements. You cannot just put a horse out on regular fence or pasture and hope that they stay in. Most Mustangs are going to run right through a regular wire fence. Since I haven't quite decided where I'm going to put these panels at yet, I'm going to continue with my chores for the day and kind of stew on where the best place might be to put them. When I was loading these panels up, they seemed like they were longer than 12 feet. They might actually be 14 feet. So I'm going to go ahead and measure them. The minimum space required to house a BLM Mustang is 400 square feet or 20 by 20 feet. With these panels being at least 12 feet long, I could make up a pen that is 2 panels by 2 panels and have it meet the requirements. Maybe because these were heavier, I thought they were longer, but they definitely are only 12 feet, which is totally fine. To give you guys kind of an idea of inappropriate and appropriate fencing material to use for a BLM Mustang, I'm going to kind of go through my property a little bit and show you guys a few things. Frisco has been hanging out with Prim in the round pen during the day, and then in the afternoon when he starts to lose his patience around her, he goes in and has a little bit of a snack. He is definitely on the upswing and recovering from his little bout of laminitis. One really good resource to investigate all of the requirements that the BLM puts forth for these Mustang is to go to the Wild Horse and Burro Program's website. You can read about their regular adoption program and the sale program, which is available to horses that have been offered for 3 different adoptions or are older than 10 years of age. The application is basically the same for both of those things, but I think there are 2 different sections in case you just want to get a sale authority horse. This application you can fill out, print, and bring with you to an adoption event, but I like to go to the online corral and fill out the adoption form there. With adoptions for the year ramping up, it looks like their website is a little bit overloaded right now. I went home to have some lunch and came back and then tried to access it again. This is where they hold their bi-monthly internet adoptions. Sometimes they have special Buy It Now events. I think there's one coming up in a few weeks for horses in Idaho. But no matter where you are going to get your Mustang from, you can fill out the application on this online portal and they can have it for you on the day of the adoption. It is really easy to fill out online. You can just put the type of horses that you're planning to get. This is something that always throws me off because I am never quite sure on what kind of animals I want to bring home. If you're hauling them in the same trailer, sometimes they do require a slam gate if you're getting younger and older horses at the same time. I am just going to fill out the corral portion for the new panels I got, which are 6 feet tall and 12 feet long. They are made out of steel, which is, in my opinion, one of the best materials to have for your Mustangs. My shelter is going to be in the barn, so the run will be attached to a stall. It's basically the same setup that I normally have. I'm just making the fencing taller to be compliant for this BLM application. I'm not sure if there is a requirement for the size shelter that needs to be available for the horses, but I think 12 by 12 is probably the minimum size you'd want to go. Maybe if you're just getting burros, it could be a little bit smaller. Like I think a burro could probably fit in Nigel's little tent. Believe it or not, a lot of people that have never had horses before think that it's a great idea to start off with a BLM Mustang. I think the adoption price is really attractive, but you still have to remember that you need to feed them properly, have proper vitamin and mineral supplements available, and have a clean water source. Since these are unhandled horses, you're not going to be able to put a halter on them and walk them right in the trailer. So you need to have an open stock trailer so the horses can run in like you would expect a bunch of cattle to do. Depending on where you're picking the horse up, a lot of times you cannot have a ramp on the trailer, and it does need to be a full top or completely enclosed trailer. I think typically you are not allowed to have more than 4 untitled horses in your possession at one time, so they do ask you about that. Since they do compliance checks on all new Mustangs, you do have to put your address down, and then they do have you draw a facility layout so they can see exactly how you're going to house these horses. They've got a bunch of rules for you to review, and then you can submit your application. If you do this online, typically it only takes a couple of days, so that is really handy. Your application is typically good for a year, so I still have an updated one on file. This really thick electrical tape that I put up for the boys in their little pasture is really nice fencing, but it is not appropriate for Mustangs. Nigel has his little pony paradise. The fencing is quite short on his pen. The requirement to get a burrow is actually much shorter than a full-size domestic horse, but this fence is still too short to bring a burrow home. The fencing requirement for those is 4.5 feet tall. One of the things people often overlook is having a gate that is actually tall enough to keep a Mustang in. With this one being only 5 feet tall, I would have to increase the height by a foot to make it compliant. This particular run would be really nice because I could just back my horse trailer up to it, open the gate, and have them run out. Instead of using this existing gate, I can just use some of my new panels to create a gate. Frisco definitely has a little bit of a spring back in his step. He still is a little bit sore when he does not have his boots on, but he is looking so much better. While you can use no climb or 2x4 wire, which is what this is, you still want to make sure it has the bones to a solid fence. I'm pretty sure this back fence would be tall enough for a yearling Mustang. It is 5 feet tall, so that would be tall enough. I really prefer to have 6-foot fences all around because that is some extra protection in case you get a really wild and flighty one. Frisco Bill was not quite sure what I was doing this afternoon, and he got a little bit more suspicious when I continued to measure. It looks like this run is the perfect size to put a 24 by 24 foot square with my new panels. I have 6 of them, so that would make it perfect because I'll use the barn wall as the other side of my little enclosure. Right now I have 2 stalls in the barn and 1 stall with an attached run open. Frisco does like spending time with Nigel, so I'm going to try and keep him in this run if I can. A few of you guys have asked me what a foot with laminitis looks like, and it basically looks the same as a regular foot, but Frisco in particular gets very squishy soles when he's having a flare-up. I did use this run last year for Scarlet. She needed a little bit of help learning about fencing. She's been pretty tough on them, but these little green panels worked good for her. Another important part about being approved for adoption is the shelter that you have available for your horse. Montana is in a group of states that have the strictest shelter policies. I am required to have a 3-sided shelter with a roof, which is obvious in the winter, but in the summer it's kind of silly because we do have really nice weather in the summer. For people that don't have access to a barn, a lot of them use these little temporary shelters that I have over in the quarantine pen. This is a shelter that has a covered hoop, and then you can get a kit to close the walls in. This is a relatively inexpensive fix to the shelter requirement. It gets far too windy for me to use these in the wide open spaces, but back here in my quarantine or retirement pen, they work really nice. You can see Nigel has a similar shelter in his little pony paradise that is much smaller. Tiny seemed pretty upset that I was doing my chores out of order this afternoon. While Tiny does enjoy spending time with the horses, she is very keen on whether or not they are wild or pretty gentle. She would not be rolling around in this pen if there was a horse she didn't know and trust in there. Although my barn with an attached run is BLM compliant, my favorite place to keep a completely wild horse is actually my round pen. This round pen is non-compliant in a lot of the states, but in areas of the country where there is more mild weather, I would be able to use this round pen if I put up a shade barrier. Some states only require a windbreak or some kind of natural cover like a tree. It's kind of interesting because Colorado and Idaho have very similar weather to us, and they have less stringent requirements for shelters for these horses. It looks like this round pen is actually 74 inches tall, so it is actually over the required height limit for fencing. You, of course, don't have to keep your horse in that requirement forever. Usually it's just until they're gentle and they do respect fencing. I've been really on a long journey with my reservation horse and getting her to respect the fencing. She was a jumper when I first got her, and she did ram a lot of the solid fences just to test them out. I'd say in the last 6 months or so, she has gotten so much better, but she has only been in this bigger turnout for a little bit over 2 weeks now. It is important before you turn your new Mustang out into a big area like this that you can catch them and put a halter on them. In most cases, it is going to be inappropriate to bring your horse home and turn it out onto a giant pasture, especially if you have no way of catching them. Ziggy has grown quite fond of Scarlet these days. Having a horse friend for your new Mustang is not a requirement, but it's something that I definitely think about. In the past, I really like to get 2 horses at once so they kind of have a friend to go through training with. I do think that it helps them transition from wild to domestic life a little bit easier. I certainly don't have time for 2 new Mustangs, so any new horse that I get is going to have to become friends with a horse I already have. I also do like to keep my new horses in quarantine no matter where they come from for at least 2 weeks. This is not a BLM requirement. They've basically been in quarantine and holding this whole entire time anyway. But the stress of traveling and being exposed to a new place and a bunch of people can stress their immune system. As far as the Mustangs go, I really don't have a preference as to a mare or a gelding. But as I'm walking around today and I see that Prim is once again in heat, it does make me take pause as to whether or not I want to add another mare. Prim is an absolute terror when she's in heat. She's been checked out medically. She just really wants to make babies with anyone that walks past her. Scarlet, on the other hand, is totally sweet and loving. Even when she's in heat, she is really nice to the other horses. That is something there's really no way to tell until you get the horse home and in the environment that you're going to keep it in. But it is something to keep in mind when you're shopping for a new horse. The last time I had Mustangs, they actually lived in this big dry lot for a while.
Oh, Zig.
I used to have it so the horses could walk from this pen into stalls in the barn, and it worked out perfect. I don't know that I would trust the integrity of these older boards anymore though. In addition to a solid fence for a new Mustang, I tend to think a little bit more about the water than maybe some people do. Since I do often get a lot of very fractious and unhandled horses, I think the water is probably one of the more important things to provide to these horses. Over the years, I found the best kind of trough to use are these little short ones. They are easy enough to clean frequently, and you can dump them periodically as the horses put their feet in them. Sometimes if the horse is too scared about the new surroundings, they have a tendency to not want to drink water. For the really scared ones, I think it has a lot to do with the fact that they are on high alert all the time and they need to have their eyeballs on their surroundings. If the water tank is too deep and they are not able to see around them while they're drinking, a lot of them just won't do it. I rarely ever have my horses drink out of regular buckets. They all get these big giant troughs. The ones that are a little bit more shallow do tend to mimic their natural water source a bit better. I've actually not had horses in this square pen for quite a while, so this tank is a little bit disgusting. My water comes right from a well, so it does tend to grow algae rather quickly. I would imagine that if your barn is on city water, then the horses may need a little bit of extra coaxing to drink when they get home. Looking out at this square pen, I think probably half of this size would be perfect for a Mustang. You want it big enough that they have enough room to move around properly, but not so big that they can gallop around and want to jump out. Some horses also feel claustrophobic in a smaller pen. I think 20 by 20 is probably still a little bit on the smaller side. Even though I did get 6-foot panels, I would still not want to get a Mustang that is a little bit more fractious because the chance of them trying to test the panels is quite a bit higher.
Prim.
While I would love to get another mare to put Prim and Scarlet in with, I think it would be far easier to get a big doofy gelding to put out with the boys. With Stewie being a half Mustang and some of these other boys being stallions for quite a long time, I think a Mustang would fit in just fine. While I do love really fractious horses, I think I have my hands full with the ones that have special training needs at this time. In the future, I am going to try a little bit harder to get one that maybe will be a little bit easier to train. When I get a new horse home, whether it's an auction horse or a Mustang or just a new domestic horse, I do like to give them a lot of downtime to just get used to their surroundings. Some people will halter break and saddle their new Mustangs within a week of getting them home, which is totally fine if the horse is ready, but I tend to get the more fractious ones and I like to go a little bit slower. As I was finishing up dragging this dry lot, I thought it would be a really good setup to put my panels in here just around the little shelter. Of course I can't do that because Scarlet and Ziggy are out here, but in the future it may be a good option for me. If you are a regular watcher of my channel, you know that I have been on the hunt for the perfect property. I would love to get a place that is twice the size of this one so I have more pasture space and can build it out so it's more efficient for what I do. Sometimes I feel like I do spend a lot of time walking around in circles just because it is not the most efficient to do cleaning and feeding. One thing I did want to show you guys in the barn, I did have Scarlet in here when she was just a little baby. Typically, you cannot put a fresh Mustang just in a stall. It is way too claustrophobic for them. Scarlet was in this stall with an attached run, but she actually tried to jump through the solid wall. That is what this dent is from. Because the weather was terrible when I got her, she did get turned out into a little makeshift round pen attached to the barn, and then I'd run her in every night. That is something that is probably not realistic with a new full-size Mustang. I feel pretty satisfied with how the barn is looking. All of the horses are happy and healthy, which tends to be the time I start dreaming about another animal to help.
Ziggy! Hi, Zig.
I think one of the most important parts about getting a new horse that is not on the BLM application is the actual amount of time and resources that you have to spend with your new animal. Some Mustangs that I'm sure you've seen on the internet, you can do a few days of good training and get a halter on them right away. Scarlet, on the other hand, took me almost 2 years to get to this point where I can just walk up to her and put a halter on. There are a lot more events this summer in Montana than I've noticed in the past, so there are definitely opportunities for me to get another wild horse. I do, however, have a lot of horses that require my attention these days. With all of the time I've been devoting to finding our new property, it seems like I've not gotten to ride as much as I had hoped. It has been nice having Studman and Goose in the barn. I think they are calming down a little bit more, and it seems like their diets are starting to work. Tomorrow I will be heading out of town a little ways to check out a Mustang adoption event. While I really have no plans to get a horse at it, it's nice to know that if I want to, I am fully prepared and BLM compliant with my facility. I hope that gave you guys some insight into what it actually takes to be prepared for a completely wild horse. Thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for the next video.